And that's basically what we're talking about this morning. Sufficient background there provided by our correspondents Linda Akigbe and Kayla Megwa. Let's take a look at what the issues are. We have this morning a very distinguished panel. Senator Bala Nahala is the chairman, Senate Committee on Air Force and former Senate Deputy Majority Leader, is a member of the APC. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Good morning, and good morning, viewers. Good
morning, and sitting right next to me on my right is Honorable Nkema Bonta, who is a former chairman, House Committee on Public Petition. He's a member of the PDP. You're welcome, Honorable.
Good morning, and morning, viewers.
And Mr. Godson Okoye is a national chairman, UDP, and former presidential candidate of the same party. Chief, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
Well, this is what we imagined initially that, I mean, looking at the order paper of the House, we're told that for the week it was not certain that this was going to be discussed. But when members resumed on Monday, we saw that it was seen that both chambers went into closed-door sessions. And we believed, even though we're not a part of it, like the fly on the wall, trying to be flies on the wall, that this was certainly something that was going to be a priority, of priority consideration for members of the National Assembly. I'm not going to ask you to tell us what you discussed behind closed doors, and that will be to both the Senate and to the House. But what informed the decision of the House to immediately take this up? Let me start with you, Honorable Abonta.
Well, electoral laws, or having good electoral law, is front burners in our business. We desire to have a good electoral law, to have the processes that produce what we want. Therefore, Mr. President, having declined assent, we resume. So let's start from there again to give it expedited action. That's just what informed us to do that immediately, because time is of essence.
Okay, so even though it was not on the order paper, from what we understood, members agreed to bring it as a matter of priority or urgency?
There are rules also gives us that latitude to, at times, suspend a rule and reintroduce something if the urgency requires so to do.
In the Senate, we know that there was a lot of, well, I say unhappiness, and this is the mildest word I can find, after the president returned the bill unsigned. And we understood that just before you went on recess, about 75 of your members had gathered signatures. There were thoughts that they were going to override the president's veto, but that didn't quite happen. You're a member of the APC. I do not know whether you were part of those who, I doubt very strongly that you were, but what would I say, what was the calming effect, or what was the calming balm which was used to appeal to members, if there was any appeal at all, to ask them to, let's give this bill another chance?
Well, let me first of all start by saying that it's an inaccurate report to say that there were 75 members of the Senate who have signed indicating that they want to veto the president on this matter. And signing in Parliament is only to show attendance. The action of every parliamentarian should be what he does on the floor of the Senate. You don't need to sign. You don't need to gather signatures. What you need to do as a representative of the people is to come and sit down and reflect the thinking of those who elected you into that office in your actions or inactions on the floor of the Senate. So it was not true in the first place. And there was nothing calming.
Was it true that people were unhappy?
Well, if I say that some people were unhappy, that may be right, but I think we should look at this from a different angle. If we have 109 senators, and we have 360 members of the House of Representatives painstakingly going through a process to arrive at a decision, and we have the executive where there is only one person elected, declining assent to that decision, two things will show here. One, that maybe the National Assembly did not painstakingly go through the process. Because if they did, honestly, they might not have arrived at the decision where one head became better than almost 500 and something people. Let's be honest, let's be sincere. So, what I can say is that yes, there may be some people who are not happy, but in order to build our democracy in future, I will advise that the position of a member of the House of Representatives and that of a senator are not small positions. They expect the highest level of patriotism, highest level of commitment, highest level of consideration in arriving at a decision that will affect the entire nation. If you don't put all this together, then you will end up doing what we just did, and then we have to backtrack. It is astonishing that 109 senators and 360 members will sit down and take a decision, and within no time come back and say we are reversing ourselves. It means the process that led us to arrive at that position was not painstaking enough.
Is that your position?
Yeah.
It means it was not painstaking enough?
Yeah, it wasn't painstaking enough. If it were, I'm absolutely sure there is no how all of us can reverse ourselves in a very dramatic manner. So
I will come to you shortly, sir.
The point I'm trying to make is that in whatever position you find yourself, you must be extremely careful when you are taking decision that is going to affect the Nigerian nation. And in doing so, that's why our out of office has always insisted, never ever allow your personal interest to affect your official decision and conduct. It's in the out of office.
So, Honorable, do you agree with him that the decision that was initially reached was not painstaking enough?
I wouldn't be in a total agreement. But I said, even from the studio, that laws shouldn't be anticipatory, shouldn't be made for one person. I may agree to the extent that that clause came in at the last minute of that bill making. But my view, however, is if 360 members, 109 senators, like opined here, did what they did to the best of their conscience, then we will tell Mr. President, they will override and veto it. For us to turn back means we were not sure what we did. And I gave an example here that NDDC Act came in that manner. President Obasanjo said, I won't sign. The National Assembly said, to hell with you, and vetoed it, and today have NDDC running and all whatnot. Therefore, to the extent that were we sure that we did a thorough job, I'll agree with him. I'll agree with him. Now, the worry remains, where are we heading to? The Senate had come with a different version, even more than contained in the rejected bill. The House also reversed to the status quo as we had before, meaning that we'll all meet again for a conference. Should the conference, because the way I saw yesterday, it's likely that at that conference that we will agree. Because they have a different position, we have a different position. And if we don't agree, what do we do? Is it a joint session or what?
We'll discuss the way forward shortly, but let me quickly go to our third guest. Chief, I wanted to ask you, part of the reasons why this decision, why the president said he wasn't going to sign initially, why he declined assent, was that he wanted options. And part of the argument that had been fielded by a number of people was that the smaller parties were going to be bearing the brunt of this, that perhaps the bigger parties might be able to afford this, but that it was going to affect the smaller parties. What was the position of your party with regards to the fact that the National Assembly had initially passed just an option for direct primaries?
Well, thank you for that nice question, and good to hear from the honorable member and the distinguished senator. You see, when certain actions are taken, they have partly answered the question. But in passing a bill, in passing a law for a country, you are not considering national interest. I've always said it. Most of the things in this country are done because national interest is lacking. And if you look at what they passed as law, it might as well be a military decree. And I'm not aware that the National Assembly, the majority of the members are military men. And here we are. For a president that people are saying is not democratic and all that, telling them this is what, the hallmark of democracy is option. That's what it is. And if you don't have option, you're not democratic. Okay, and then all of them are there, and nobody will even advert their mind to the fact that most parties ordinarily have been practicing what they're doing. And the law reflects what people do. If you have direct, you have indirect, and of course consensus. Most parties have been doing that.
Chief, sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to bring in the fact that, even before the National Assembly passed this bill, it was not easy passage for them. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I'm a little taken aback when they say that it's either they didn't follow the processes or they were not diligent in their own work. We saw the rancor on the floor of the Senate, we saw the rancor on the floor of the House, and it took a while for them to eventually reach a consensus. As a matter of fact, the Senate even at some point had to reverse itself on the issue of transmission of results, which was the initial bone of contention. And eventually this went to their conference committee and they were able to agree. So we thought that, and there were lots of other innovations, because some people will say that this bill, the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, was more than direct or indirect primaries. So when you look at the bill, would it really be fair to say that it was passed as if it were a military bill?
But that's what I'm telling you. Because why are they squabbling? Why are they fighting? If all of them are there to advance the interests of Nigeria and to advance the interests of democracy, democracy belongs to nobody. Democracy is what all of them work towards achieving. And if their objective is to embellish democracy, to make democracy more robust, why would they be squabbling? But it's because there are pockets of interest here and there, and that's why the Honorable Member said, you don't make laws for individuals. You make laws to capture the interest of a people, not for a person. The moment you make laws to capture an individual, to punish an individual, to improve the life of an individual, you have misfired.
Was that clause included for an individual?
That's what I'm saying. Why are they squibbling if it's not personal interest? If all of them agree to a national interest that is above personal interest, there won't be need for squabble. Because it is something that will affect everybody positively. So what's the fight about?
We've had the arguments for and against direct primaries.
It doesn't matter whatever they're saying.
No. I mean, let's remove that of the national. I mean, let's remove the National Assembly from this conversation. Yes. Among CSOs, among civil society, and I'm not just talking about the organizations. I'm talking about even the general populace. Yes. The arguments between, because that's what this did at the end of the day. It brought to the fore the arguments for and against direct primaries and indirect primaries as well. There were merits and demerits. Yes. For the smaller parties, what was the concern of the smaller parties?
That's what I'm telling you. The smaller parties are more interested in democracy. Once you don't give options, you're no longer democratic.
What is deeper in a democracy than people being able to select amongst themselves, amongst the political parties, the people that will represent them in different positions?
In direct primaries, you're going to move everybody there. And most of the time, it's easier to get those people confused. But the point is, if you have indirect primaries where the real people that understand the party manifesto, the party programs are there. Because if you have direct primaries, you may just get people that are not even members of the party that will come there. And then they say, okay, they are members of this party. For that purpose of electing or nominating candidates.
In a party like yours, for instance, where, I mean, it is argued that your party is a small party and you can debunk or accept that. The question is, for your party, it would seem that it would be easier for your members, and I don't know how many members you have, but it will be easier for your members. You have been a presidential candidate, for them to say, it is Chief Godson Okoye we want to be our presidential candidate, and the popular vote is what is carried within your party. What's undemocratic about that?
I agree with you on that, but that's not the way to say, that's not a reason to say you don't have to create options. You must create options. Just like we're talking about, I was listening to your analysis on the Lagos situation and the rail. You end up creating there. Nobody thinks about the future. The future is about options. It must be dynamic. You don't have to create just one option and say this is one size fits all. It doesn't work that way. The options will be there. It is left for the parties. The parties are supposed to be independent. The parties are supposed to carry on. They choose whichever one they want. And in most party constitutions, I can tell you, they all have all this. They have direct primaries, they have indirect primaries, they have consensus. Some parties will say they can change the mode provided for in the constitution. If you have a congress or a convention, they can say, okay, let's set down these rules, let's stand this down and adopt this procedure. So the size of the party, and it's been advantageous to parties that are not so big, will not make it the right thing to do when you don't have options. Options must be there. And I commend the president for even thinking it wise to tell them, you people need to create options.
Okay, let's flip this to Lagos now. I know my colleagues have questions for you, gentlemen. Yeah. Chamberlain?
Yeah, let me start with Senator Naala. From what you say, it comes across as though you'd say the National Assembly put these clauses there for their own personal interests. In other words, they deceived Nigerians by telling us that this was in the interest of Nigeria for democratic processes. Is that right?
I will enter a plea of not guilty to that charge. There was nowhere in my statement where I said they inserted it for their own interest. But what I did say was that the process was not painstaking enough, and that if it were, there was no how 360 plus 190 people would sit down and take a decision that one individual will reverse. So I am only advising that in future, in order to develop our democracy, those who have been elected and who have sworn to oath of office should try as much as they can to live within the confines of the oath of office they have taken. I.e., in taking decisions for the nation, they should avoid situation that is as dramatic and as embarrassing as the situation that we have found ourselves. That is my opinion, and I'm sure under the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I'm entitled to that. Thank you.
Well, Senator, perhaps by way of following up on that same conversation with Chamberlain, it would sound like, it looks like the National Assembly wasn't completely or fully persuaded about the decision they made in the first place, inserting only the direct primaries clause, as opposed to what is in place now, the adjustments that have been made. Because there are those who argue that if the persuasion was that strong, they could have overridden the president's veto.
So that's exactly what I'm telling you. If the process has been painstaking enough, and there was commitment and honesty in the process that led to that, I'm absolutely sure it will provide a corresponding commitment to override Mr. President on that matter. And I still maintain that that might not have been the issue based on the results that we have cultivated maybe from the process. And when I make this comment, it is solely intended to keep our elected officials within the confines of the oath of office they have taken while being elected as either members of the House of Representatives or senators, including Mr. President himself, and such other offices that are being created by the Constitution.
Senator, we'll come back to you on some other information concerning the Senate's inclusion of some elements into that bill. But, Honorable, let me ask you the same question. There are those who argue, and I think it was even from the House of Representatives, that that single option of direct primaries, which the Speaker, by the way, still insists is his own choice and is the best way for him. It seems the National Assembly is not fully persuaded that the direct primaries option is the best and only option that should be inserted into that law. Otherwise, there would have been an override of the president's veto.
My reply will be that the whole drama had exposed the lack of will on the National Assembly. The whole drama had shown we are not truly independent. Like I canvassed from this studio, it showed that we are being teleguided and directed. Otherwise, if we had agreed that this is the option and we believed in it, then we'll stand by it. But like the president had alluded to 75% signature, even though corrected. What happened after the break? Parties had given guidelines or instructions had passed through. If we are truly independent and believe in ourselves and had the political will, we will say we've done a thing for the benefit of the people and we'll stand by it. It's all the same process of lawmaking until the president signs or refuses and then get a veto. Otherwise, that is the procedure. So I do not think that members or had no serious commitment as such. It means we had no independent mind. Our mind willed wherever the powers that be had directed. You see, that's why I said laws should be made futuristic. Laws should be made having the totality of the interest of the nation, like our friend said here, not based on what we think about a person. Mr. President, how did he come to power? Was it indirect, primaries and so on? And what beats my mission is that even now we practice all the three options.
Yeah, Honorable Abonta, just a minute.
Consensus
so when you say, hope you can hear me, the National Assembly made the Nigerian people believe that they consulted with their constituencies and they said this was what they wanted. But now you say they are being teleguided. So that is completely different from the narrative they sold to us, that they were being told to do this by their constituencies.
Let me take, don't tell me you don't understand what happens in National Assembly. Don't tell me you do not know that the independence we claim we have, that we do not. You've alluded to it. See, yes, our constituents may have said do this or that, but the voting is assumed to be the collective interest of every constituent put together, assumed so. But is that so? So if we represent people, we represent constituencies, we came and exercised our individual rights that collectively turned out to be one option. Of course, you will also know that at the time that those arguments and debates went on, people objected, people agreed, and they looked at it. But even for us right now, from my own party, I don't want to be go on party line, my party is agreeing at the floor of the House, okay, let us do whatever the senators did, because if you look at the whole of the totality of what they did, it's also what we do, just that they said, now let us put it there. Because I don't want any reason why Mr. President will not sign again. What does he want? Because if we've done what we thought we could do for the nation, and he says, no, I won't sign.
You said
let's do whatever he wants.
They were being teleguided
so that we will
by the powers that be. And the powers that be are not from the constituency.
No. Powers that be, not from the constituency. Powers that be from the party, from the unseen hands that removes the party. Otherwise, why will after holiday our mood, belief changed? What happened?
Okay, so you'll talk to us about that when we return in a moment. Join us again. You were making a point as to how the National Assembly went on recess and suddenly came back and things have changed, how they were teleguided. But who could have teleguided them? Who are these powers that be? Because, I mean, we see lots of governors, they say, no, we don't like this option. Even the president had objections to it. So who were these unseen hands?
Mr. Chamberlain, you even showed through your studio the activities of governors at the passage of that bill. We all knew what happened. The protest, governors forum met immediately. Party chieftains met immediately. A lot of issues raised on why will the people have that power. So asking me who teleguided them now, you know. So what were the governors going to Villa to do? What meeting outside NEC, National Executive Council? Why did the parties, I mean, all the papers carried various meetings by governors, by party chieftains, saying no. The lobbying started. The canvassing started. We all saw it. We all heard of it. We all read about it. So asking me now to name who, I wasn't there.
Honorable Abonta, if you weren't there as a party member, so how come you say I know? Because the only thing I know is what we reported, which every Nigerians know. But you are a party member. You know what you do behind the scenes.
You reported it to the whole world, to Nigerians. Look, governors are gathering. They are protesting. All the objections. So those who gathered and objected did the lobbying, if you wanted to say. Those who said, no, we won't agree, did that teleguiding. They gave the instructions. And of course, you know that demigods or semigods, they are almighty and very powerful. And they've shown their powers. It exerted their powers, and it translated to our somersaulting.
In other words, we cannot take the National Assembly serious when they tell us we will veto this, we will override this, because power that big can always push them aside.
But I also told you from here that we lack
is that a yes or no?
I'm watching to see if we can get that. And it happened. My prediction came true. I said we lack the political will to say, Mr. President, we don't agree, we'll stand by our position. And I repeat it here. We lack the political will to say, no, what we did, we remain and abide by it. And I pray and I watch, I pray and believe that one day the National Assembly will get up to that. They can say, no, 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 no. See, let me tell you.
Well, Honorable, this is you saying, saying this ninth assembly is essentially a rubber stamp.
Say that again.
No, this is you telling Nigerians that this National Assembly is a rubber stamp. Is that right?
If not, I even saw somewhere rubber stamp without ink. If not so, why will we not say, Mr. President, we don't agree? We have, say, 360 members, like my senior colleague alluded. 109 members sat down, me, I'll say painstakingly, because I was going to chamber, I was reading between lines, painstakingly, agreed the thing. After holidays, after meetings of big weeks, after meeting of the kitchen cabinets, after meeting of the top executives, we came back and spinelessly said, we are going to reconsider that whatever. Who is in charge now from that attitude? Who is in charge? Is it the parliament or the executive? Let me know.
Well,
from your experience in broadcasting, who is in charge? That is the problem. Are we independent? Did we say truly what we wanted to say? Or we are asked to say something and we're also asked to say another thing again and maybe asked to say another one tomorrow?
How do you feel about being referred to as rubber stamp?
Well, I don't know what I call rubber stamp, so it could be democratic obedience. It could be democratic obedience. It could
That's
be
a new one.
Going to party line and decision. Obey your masters for there to be peace.
Wow. Well, I'm sure a lot of Nigerians are listening, and they'll get a better sense of what plays out at the National Assembly, so perhaps they can approach these issues with better understanding. And we quite appreciate you actually telling things as they are, Honorable Abonta. But before I go to Chief Okoye, let me take on Senator Naala, because there's the teleguiding, as it were. You know, after the president declined the assent, and then the National Assembly had to now rescind its decision. But then there's a previous one, which was making direct primaries the only option. Who, in quotes, teleguided the National Assembly to stick with that option? Because as it is now, clearly it was not something from the constituents. It was not from the people. So whose idea was it to have that provision? If Senator Naala thinks it wasn't painstaking enough, perhaps there were personal interests. So who was responsible for that provision?
Well, let me first of all correct one impression. I never, at any point during this interview, used the word teleguided. That is the opinion of my friend and brother. And I will never again accept that the National Assembly is a rubber stamp assembly. I will not accept that. What I will accept, and which I have said in a very diplomatic way, is to say that the process that led to the insertion of direct primaries and the adoption of it as a law by the National Assembly was not painstaking enough. That's what I said. I didn't say it wasn't painstaking, but I said it wasn't painstaking enough. And I said, if it were painstaking enough, it means it will have carried the commitment, the resilience, the constituency input and everything into account before arriving at that. And that if that had been done, I'm absolutely sure it will have been very, very difficult for members of the National Assembly to somersault from the position they have taken in the shortest period of time within which this happened. That's what I'm saying. And I'm saying that in future, for the development of our democracy, I will advise and encourage that the National Assembly as an institution should carefully take into account every controversial or normal process that is being brought before it, before arriving at a conclusion. That's what I'm saying. And I think this is what you should understand.
But Senator, what you just said now, when you say it's not painstaking enough, what is missing?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. What is missing is that if there had been a robust debate, an opinion collation, democratically, don't forget that one of the most respected definition of democracy is that it is a recurrent suspicion whereby more than half the people are right more than half the time. You will have noticed from what my colleague said that the issue of direct came at the dying minute on the floor of the House of Representatives when they were considering the report of the Committee on Electoral Matters. What it means is that it was never discussed nor adopted by the Committee of the House, but that it came as an amendment, allegedly, since I don't have the records, by the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And I have seen the Speaker of the House of Representatives doing whatever was humanly possible to defend that position. But what will prove me right was that on one breath, I heard the Speaker saying that because of the number of attrition in the National Assembly, there was the need to protect members of the National Assembly from the influence of governors, and therefore the resort to direct primaries. Now, the catch there is that personal interest was allowed in the process. That is the catch there, if you are getting me. Because he particularly said the turnover of members is very disturbing, and that there is the need to protect members of the National Assembly from the governors. In the first phase, that failed. That argument will fall flat because it will have concluded with the fact that that decision was taken to promote personal interest against the oath of office we have taken as members of the National Assembly. That's one. The second one, I have heard him say that it was to provide opportunity for Nigerians to take full part in electing those who will represent them, either as president or members of the National Assembly, or such other offices created by the Constitution that are elected offices. Great argument, fantastic. But you and me know that we can do much more than direct primaries to ensure that. And having traveled from 1999 to date, we cannot claim not to know what is clogging the wheel of democracy in Nigeria. And we cannot claim not to know that we do not have the power, or we do not have the knowledge and the wisdom to intervene legislatively to arrest that situation. So you see, I have spent so much time in Parliament. I have dedicated so much of my time in parliamentary practice. And I think I must be given the benefit of knowing what parliamentary practices are. I still maintain, and I will maintain, and as you know me, whatever position I have taken, I have never somersaulted, that the process was not painstaking enough, and if it were, then it will have supplied the necessary commitment for us to override Mr. President when he refused to assent to that. But it was because it was not painstaking enough that we can now come back and somersault. For whatever reason we are giving, I don't want to go into that issue. But that does not mean that I will accept the fact that the National Assembly is a rubber stamp. The only thing is that the process was not painstaking enough, and if it were, we will have muzzled the commitment to go further if we genuinely believed and participated in that conclusion. I'm absolutely sure we will have had the same genuine commitment to override Mr. President.
Well, Senator Nala, just two quick issues before I take it to Chief Okoye, because Honorable Abonta introduced that expression, democratic obedience. And this is quite, instructive, because if it was the idea of the Speaker to introduce this provision, and members think essentially, well, this is not the way to go. It's not democratic enough, so we don't have to obey. Is it hard for the members to say, you know what, we don't agree with this, let's debate this properly, and then come to a proper conclusion rather than just, falling in line with the leadership of the House? Because what I hear you say is first among equals. So isn't that possible for members of the National Assembly to essentially stand their ground and say, well, leadership, we don't agree with you?
Well, you see, the good thing I have is that no matter how unfair you want to be to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, he has been in the House of Representatives, to my knowledge, from 2003 till date. So he cannot claim not to have institutional memory. Secondly, he is a lawyer. He cannot claim not to know the legal development in our democracy. Those of us with limited knowledge of the understanding of the law of this country knew that as far back as 1999, the Supreme Court has taken a very clear decision on the issue of independence of parties. And that case was Saminu Turaki versus former Minister Dalhatu, Bashir Dalhatu, if I remember. Sorry, my memory is failing me. I'm not getting younger. But the decision there was clear, that political parties should, as nearly as possible, be allowed to determine the process from which their candidates emerge for the purpose of filing them for election. And the judiciary tactfully tried to avoid getting involved in determining who the candidate of the party will be. Now, when we came to insert that provision in the law, the earlier law, direct, indirect, and consensus, it was to reflect the position of the Supreme Court in the case of Saminu Turaki versus Bashir Al-Hatu. So that institutional memory should have saved the House from getting involved in trying to reverse the situation without finding more valid reasons given by the Supreme Court in reversing the situation. That has not been done for whatever reason. And we are hearing, with the greatest respect from my colleague, that that law was intended for an individual. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I must say and maintain that that process was not painstaking enough.
Finally, Senator Nala, and this deals with the clauses, the numberings. I needed to shed light on it. So in the Electoral Act itself, the section on the the primaries generally is Section 87. In the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, it's the same 87. In fact, the one that was the amended clauses around October, which was presented, was also Clause 87. In fact, the President's letter withholding assent referenced it as Section 87, but yesterday it changed to Clause 84. So on that primaries bit, is it Section 87 now, or 84? Just to be clear, because what I'm seeing and hearing now is 84.
You see, when an amendment of this nature is doing that, is what we call renumbering, because the law has to flow with the necessary intendment of Parliament. So we renumber. From this position, I honestly cannot tell you what the clause is, because that is the work of the clerk of the House, and as represented by the clerk of the Senate when that decision was taken, and the vote and proceedings of the Senate. So I'm really not in a position to tell you what the renumbering will be and which clause it will be. Like it has always been said, the drunkard is only interested in the contents of the bottle. You know, after taking that, he throws away the bottle and go. So I am only interested in the three concepts of direct, indirect, and consensus. Maybe this is the time to intervene and tell you why the Senate felt that consensus should be added in the amendment. And happily enough, it has just been captured by my colleague, my friend here, when the issue of small parties was used as an example. Now, if you are making a law, are you making it for the big parties, or you are taking judicial notice of the fact that other small parties equally exist? So if the big parties have money, they can muzzle direct primaries or indirect primaries. And the small parties can sit down and say, look, of all of us, we think the best person to carry our flag as president is Mr. This. And everybody said, yes, yes. And that becomes consensus. So he becomes a candidate of the party. That is why that insertion is necessary, or reasonably necessary. You know, that is what we call the doctrine of occupied field. Occupy, make the law in such a way that it anticipates even the non-existent situation.
But Senator,
and I think that is what my brother is saying, futuristic enough.
Yeah, but I think that was the bone of contention in the House of Reps when they found out that the Senate had included that consensus option. So was that request in the letter that the president wrote to the Senate, adding the consensus option?
I have not seen the letter written by Mr. President on the issue of consensus. But you see, when you are examining a law, you are not tying yourself to the request of Mr. President. You can, in the House or in the Senate, say that, yes, Mr. President said that direct primaries is not convenient or politically expedient, or is not, or whatever reason he might have given. But you can say, okay, in view of the fact that we recognize the fact that other small parties exist, why do we need to put them through all this, like my friend will say, higgy-haga? Let us give them a provision that will equally accommodate their own peculiarity. And that is allowed in that process.
Senator, Chief Okoye, forgive me. I almost inducted you into the National Assembly right now. Please forgive us. We had to just essentially get a sense. Maybe I was being futuristic, maybe not. But to get a sense of the process so that we can speak to these issues. So, Chief Okoye, the fear for a lot of people, and I know you might want to respond to some of the issues raised, but the fear for a lot of people is all of this is playing out so that there will not be a new law ahead of the 2023 general elections. I mean, there seems to be another contention with the inclusion of consensus candidate by the Senate, and the House does not have that. So, putting together all of this, what are your thoughts?
Well, I haven't listened to the narratives of the National Assembly members. It is very clear, like Chamberlain had been trying to ask them, what is missing? What is it that is not there? What is not there is that, like the distinguished senator has said, it's not painstaking enough. And not being painstaking enough includes how many senators you have in a state. How many of those senators conferred with their governors, discussed with the governors? We are discussing laws. The country exists in the states. And if you make laws in a way that the governors don't feel they are carried along, like the honorable member said, the governors met. The governors forum met and they discussed, they went to the villa, they did that. That showed you that it wasn't painstaking enough. What the distinguished senator is not supplying is the details. That these things happened is a proof that it was not painstaking enough, and not being painstaking enough includes consultation. They've not consulted well. I'm not sure that they even discussed this with their constituents. In Anambra State, where I come from, I don't think anybody even raised the issue in Anambra State within the period. prior to the
Chief,
passage
let me
of that
ask
bill.
you. Let me ask you. You have emerged a presidential candidate a few times. Through what process have you emerged?
Just once. Indirect primaries. That was 2015.
Indirect primary. So
Yes.
it means that with the inclusion of direct and indirect, your party is covered.
We're covered. But that, you see, I keep telling you, you don't make laws to suit a party or to suit an individual.
No, my point is, the point I'm saying is this. Yes. It's not really necessary to include the third option of consensus.
No, why not? You see, it's not a must, you must adopt it. You put it there as an option so that you don't leave people to do what the law does not contemplate.
No, but even if you eventually agree on a consensus candidate, there must be a process through which everybody affirms that this is the person whom we have consensually agreed to field. Isn't that correct?
There has to be a process, but the law is supposed to guide the people. It's supposed to direct the people.
So, the point I'm making is, is it really necessary to include it?
The consensus does not mean that you are going to muzzle people. There are options. You either do this or this or this. Instead of saying you only do one. Even God created us with two legs.
No,
why did he create us with one leg?
What we have right now,
yes.
I mean, the National Assembly has reversed itself.
Yes.
The House now has direct and indirect.
Correct.
The Senate has direct, indirect, and consensus.
Yes.
They're still going to harmonize.
The more the options, the merrier. Put the options there, let the parties pick the one they want. It's a very simple thing. They mustn't adopt the three of them. Any party can adopt anyone, but the thing is, let it be within the ambience of the law, within the contemplation of the law, instead of you're doing something that is outside the law. We're only having problems.
We're totally out of time.
No, hold on. We're having problem because when they see the president saying, I won't sign, it's a constitutional thing, it's provided for in the Constitution. But if you are on the right path, your policy or your laws are based on sound footing, even the president's not signing it, you override it.
I just want to quickly confirm this from Senator Nala before we go. Senator, would you say that every time that the president returns a bill to the House or to the National Assembly unsigned, it means that the National Assembly was not thorough?
Are you using the word thorough or painstaking process? You see, I have
they were synonyms.
the privilege.
Painstaking and thorough. They're not synonyms for you.
They are distinct and distinguishable.
Okay, so let me use your words then. Would you say that every time that the president doesn't sign a bill which has been duly passed by the National Assembly, the National Assembly was not thorough?
Not every time. Most of the times. And you can see in other civilized democracies around the world.
Do you think that this singular line or clause in the entire bill, because there have been arguments, there are those who believe that the president never wanted to sign. The governor of Rivers State has said it several times, that, for instance, the Petroleum Industry Act, he wasn't satisfied. He signed it and sent it back with amendments, and that the same could have been done for this. Do you think that it was not enough? It was enough for him not to have signed, to have declined assent to the bill?
You see, every bill has its implication on the nation. And the president is the president of the nation. He's not the president of Villa. So when he's taking his decision, he is considering the Imo man, he is considering the Bayelsa man, he's considering the Sokoto man.
It's a direct question,
yes,
Senator. And it needs a direct answer, sir.
So it's not a direct answer, because the direct answer will commit me into saying what cannot be accurate. And I don't think that is correct. Well, that is right.
I think that just like Chamberlain saying National Assembly say rubber stamp, no. They should stop addressing us so. Rather, they should help us to help ourselves. You know why? Because they know the truth. They know all. The media should help us to do things, saying we're merely rubber stamp. No. But our attitude, our behavior suggests we are working to suit some person or persons. Like he said,
you have refused to make reference to this person. You're not very clear on
I am clear about the persons. Like, Mr. President is not a president for Villa Heights. He's a president for all. And we should be able to not confront, but meet him, say, this is what we've done. Or consult before, what do you really want? Let's put it and debate it thoroughly. Because we don't lay all bare at the table. Brings these problems. Why won't you tell us this is what we want, for example? Now he has told us he wants options. we were practicing these options, we had no issue. The mode of producing a candidate wasn't a real issue in the Electoral Act. Because what we are laboring now is not different from what we had practiced before.
So looking at what you currently have, do you think they are going to be adding one more option, or do you think that the House will be persuading the Senate to go with its own option?
The House will definitely, at the end of the day, in our democratic obedience, not because we are about stamp, we are not, in obedience we will toe their line. Because that's, I want them to toe the line
of the Senate.
Yeah, because one, there's nothing different from what they merely emphasize the obvious, what we have been doing. See, so that's because we cannot agree, but we have to obey. In their wisdom, 109 elders said, okay, let's just add also the interest of consensus in case. Even big parties do consensus. But my worry is, who will do this consensus, in what parlor? Who are the members of this consensus committee? Who will be this consensus committee?
Yeah, but even when the consensus is like, just an aside, don't they have to still do some primaries to affirm?
No, consensus is no primary. No, consensus. Oh, it's Mr. A, we all consent. Who are the consenting panel?
Parties.
So that is the issue I have. Otherwise, consensus.
So can that be determined as a democracy if you now include that? Would that still be a democratic process?
Why not?
Can I help you? Can I help you?
In a few words.
Yeah. Why will a party say we have zoned our presidency into this region of the country?
It's about consensus.
You have, if it's democracy, you have excluded the other part. And let me tell you, what makes you think generality of Nigerians want a president, whether qualified or not qualified, from the zone from which the party has done its presidency?
Okay. Let's leave it at that. Questions to certainly ponder. I have to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Honorable Nkem Ambonte, your former chairman, House Committee on Public Petitions, and a member of the PDP, thank you for coming. Dear Senator Alatna Allah, who is the chairman, Senate Committee on Air Force, thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily as well. And Chief Godson Okoye, national chairman of the UDP, thank you so much for coming on as well.